After decades of silence, affairs, grief, murmurs behind closed doors, and one shocking revelation that completely rewrites her legacy, Shirley Jones, now 92, finally breaks through. Stay put. You won't believe the secret twist in her story. The beginning resembled something from a Hollywood screenplay. Having just won an Oscar for her performance in Elmer Gantry, Shirley Jones was the epitome of elegance, naivete, and unadulterated fame. But Broadway's bright spot was Jack Cassidy, who was charming, funny, and had a voice that could take over a room in an instant. Press coverage of the collision of these two worlds in the early 1960s was intense. They appeared to be the epitome of glamour, youthful, and glowing. Their relationship appeared to the outer world to be nothing less than magical. A prominent woman married to a prominent guy. What other possible ending might there be for the story? However, that is where looks were misleading. Because there was a much darker force driving the marriage beneath the flawless grins and stunning red carpet appearances. Shirley has acknowledged that she was captivated by Jack's charismatic charm as much as his skill. People were drawn in and forced to forget themselves by the kind of energy. He had a way of making everyone around him believe that he was the universe's center. Shirley, who had been raised in a small Pennsylvania town before being found by Rodgers and Hammerstein, saw Jack as a symbol of peril, adventure, and the rush of living in the fast lane of Hollywood. In those early days, everything was euphoric. Hollywood's best attended their glitzy events, which included Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, and a host of other celebrities. Jack loved the limelight, usually making jokes and taking center stage. Shirley did the role of the devoted wife, praising her husband's self-assurance and his ability to make anyone feel like his best friend. A union made in heaven, they were an irresistible force when combined. Outside, anyway. They were adored by the cameras, but their personal lives revealed otherwise. Jack's need for attention extended beyond the stage. Even in the early years of marriage, Shirley saw disturbing trends, overly intense flirtations, prolonged looks, and whispered rumors she could pretend she didn't hear. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that all Hollywood men had eyes that wandered. She had, after all, grown up with conventional ideals. She had never heard of divorce and her natural tendency was to persevere. But beneath the glittering exterior, fissures started to appear. The energy, audacity, and confidence that made Jack so captivating were also the seeds of his demise. Success wasn't all he was after. Everywhere he could find it, he sought validation. And undoubtedly, the fantasy of a romantic tale from a storybook started to feel like a perfectly manicured background that could fall apart at any time. The storm clouds were already gathering above, but the fairy story had just begun. Jack's restlessness will eventually be shown to Shirley as more than a personality trait. She could never have predicted how their marriage would be affected by this secret. Because she discovered later that Jack was showing his love to other people besides her. And not only with females. One could not help but notice Jack Cassidy's presence from the start. Not only was he attractive, he had a magnetic quality. He was said to as the life of every room by others. With only a story, a joke, or a song, the man could transform an ordinary get-together into a memorable evening. Women were enamored with him. Men looked up to him. Because of his unique charm and self-assurance, he was practically untouchable. And Shirley, with her upbringing in a tiny town and her innate friendliness, was captivated by him. However, Shirley would eventually discover that Jack's allure had a perilous price. Attention was a must for him. A drug was involved. Additionally, he sought more the more he used the substance. His flings soon became serious relationships. Furthermore, infidelity was nothing new in Hollywood, but Jack's actions went beyond the typical rumors. Not only did he occasionally leave the marriage, but he had a double life that Shirley could hardly keep up with. The affairs initially involved women, other actors, partygoers, and even fans who crossed his bounds. Later in life, Shirley said that she ignored many of these betrayals because she believed it was a normal aspect of life in Hollywood. The affection she had for him was too great to leave. Additionally, Jack had a knack of luring her back in with charm, excuses, and unfulfilled promises. Rumors soon surfaced, however, that Jack's transgressions were not limited to women. The couple's friends claimed to have heard startling tales. Jack's encounters with men in the theater industry, including surreptitious liaisons. These rumors were explosive at a period when Hollywood would hide any indication of similar romances. Later, Shirley herself verified what many had rumored. As far as their marriage was concerned, Jack Cassidy was publicly bi. It was unimaginable to the world, but behind closed doors, Shirley had to face the truth about her husband. She was conflicted by the revelation. She wanted to keep their family together and loved him, but she also recognized his talent. In contrast, she was living with a man whose appetites drew him in ways she couldn't match. Shirley previously acknowledged that Jack openly informed her that he wants to feel every emotion, love, and passion in life. He was a man who, even in the face of love, would not be bound. This was undoubtedly a horrible fact. Regardless of his love for her, the guy she had married would never be her exclusive possession. And that knowing was a constant source of pain for her. There was the same question at every gathering, every vacation, and every new production he featured in. Who might Jack discover next? However, it wasn't just the affairs that broke Shirley. It was the boldness with which Jack led his double life, nearly defying her to confront him. When she eventually did, his startling reaction made clear how shaky their marriage really was. Shirley Jones seems to have everything. The world envied her for her spouse, 3 gorgeous sons, and a dazzling Hollywood career. She was the love of America, a woman who exuded grace and goodness. But behind the scenes, she was bearing a burden that got bigger every year. No longer were Jack's constant betrayals merely hearsay. She had to live with them every day, and the emotional toll was immense. As she later admitted, Shirley pretended that everything was fine throughout the majority of her marriage to Jack. The cameras flashed, and she grinned. She lauded her spouse when questioned by the media. Her role was flawless. She was disintegrating on the inside, though. His extramarital activities were known to her. She was aware that he was having affairs with guys, and she knew that she couldn't stop him. The act of cheating itself wasn't the hardest part. The fact that Jack was no longer even attempting to conceal it was the realization. Jack would brazenly flirt with Shirley, often vanishing during gatherings and then reappearing hours later as if nothing had happened, according to friends. And whereas most women would have erupted in rage, Shirley refrained from speaking. She had been raised with the values of loyalty, marital vows, perseverance, and having children in mind. She might have destroyed her family by leaving Jack, but instead she suffered in quiet for years. However, silence has a cost. Shirley lost herself. She once acknowledged that she felt inferior to Jack because of his actions, as if she could never please him no matter how hard she tried. She never stopped loving him, though. The agony was exacerbated by that. The truth of his betrayals and her commitment were in continual conflict. She found herself in a vicious circle. Again, forgive, hurt, forgive. Shirley tried to confront him sometimes. Why couldn't he be faithful? Why wasn't their love sufficient? In keeping with his usual candor, Jack didn't mince words. He explained to her that he was not a man of faithfulness. He was not a monogamous person. Shirley felt as though it was a stab to her heart, but she had no choice but to accept it. Even while he tore her apart piece by piece, he remained the love of her life. Shirley did a good job of hiding it. In order to maintain the public perception of a happy Hollywood couple, she dedicated herself to her career, her boys, and her family. Those closest to her, however, noticed the flaws. She had moments when she started crying. Times when she acknowledged that she wasn't sure how much longer she could put up with it. The story doesn't stop there, though. Because Hollywood itself started to pay attention as Shirley attempted to hide her misery. The rumors were now headlines rather than murmurs. And the scandal would reach a level Shirley never would have thought possible given what the world started to say about Jack Cassidy's secret life. Rumor is the lifeblood of Hollywood. And Shirley and Jack had evolved from a glamorous marriage by the late 1960s. There was always conjecture about them. Like wildfire, rumors circulate behind the glittering events and magazine spreads. Jack Cassidy's wandering eye was well known in Hollywood circles. However, the specifics of his extramarital romances were more daring, bizarre, and challenging for Shirley to ignore as rumors. Hints of trouble started to appear in the tabloids. There were blind pieces about a golden-voiced leading man who was spotted leaving nightclubs with men much younger than him. During rehearsals, Jack would occasionally approach ladies and other times males, according to industry sources. The secrecy surrounding it all only served to stoke the flames. The rumors were combustible at a period when scandals like this could destroy a career in an instant. She was well aware of these whispers, Shirley subsequently admitted. In private, friends and acquaintances would ask her if the reports were genuine, making her put on a grin and brush them off with well-chosen phrases. But she was heartbroken on the inside. She was certain they weren't false. Jack himself didn't hesitate to show off his victories. He was practically careless, even in front of her. He appeared to think that he was impervious to criticism and that his charm would protect him from any repercussions. Partygoers started telling more graphic stories, which made the problem worse. Jack would boast about his experiences after drinking, sometimes right in front of Shirley. As if he wanted people to know he wasn't constrained by convention, others said he even enjoyed the shock value. Every whispered tale was a new wound for Shirley. She had to deal with more than simply adultery as a wife. While Hollywood watched and scrutinized her, she was a public person attempting to maintain her dignity. The irony was harsh. Shirley was chosen to play America's sweetheart, the idealized mother figure that viewers loved. Hollywood capitalized on her inability to control the mayhem in her own household. One rumor after another appeared more ridiculous than the previous. Before long, the topic had expanded beyond Jack's affairs. It concerned the type of woman Shirley must be to tolerate it. From Jack's actions, the rumors turned to Shirley's silence, portraying her as either astonishingly innocent or heartbreakingly faithful. But Shirley persevered. Her pain was hidden under a polished facade, and she remained silent. By now, however, the strain was too much to take. It was a persistent rumor. And they were becoming worse. Shirley was actually clinging to a marriage that was clearly failing, as everyone else could see. Even while the rumors were hurtful, it wasn't until decades later that Shirley made the decision to speak out for herself that the big shock occurred. Not only did her revelation at the age of 92 validate the rumors, but it also went one step further and exposed truths that even people who believed they were familiar with the narrative were shocked by. Shirley Jones's marriage to Jack Cassidy weighed heavily on her for many years. She quietly showed the world her well-groomed exterior, her radiant wife, her proud motherhood, and her acting prowess. However, time has a way of releasing the bonds of secrecy. With little left to lose, Shirley eventually spoke out at the age of 92, and her words left everyone in awe. Shirley's memoir and interviews exposed the startling reality of her life with Jack. He was never faithful at all, she freely acknowledged. Not everyone was startled by the innumerable affairs with women, though. It served as the validation of what Hollywood had merely hinted at. Additionally, her husband, Jack Cassidy, had extramarital affairs. Shirley claimed she embraced something she would never fully comprehend. Shirley had kept that secret for him, preserving his legacy even though it devastated her, in a time when such disclosures were career-ending. According to her, Jack was a man driven by desire who would do whatever it took to experience everything life has to offer. Desperate to keep her family together, he told her straight out that he would never be content with just one person, and she undoubtedly put up with it. Her love for him and the frequent betrayals that left her exhausted left her feeling both hurt and helpless. Her infidelity wasn't the only thing that shocked people with her admissions. It was the frankness of how badly it ruined her. Shirley acknowledged that she felt ashamed and conflicted between her emotional suffering over learning about her husband's secret existence and her public persona as a nice celebrity. She still referred to Jack as her true love, though. Although she acknowledged his shortcomings, she never downplayed the emotion that united them. She spoke of him with affection and anguish. Shirley's revelation that Jack's actions weren't concealed from her was among her most startling admissions. He flashed it. He was trying her limitations repeatedly, almost daring her to leave, and he wanted her to know. Nevertheless, she remained. People had been wondering for years why she put up with such suffering and why she didn't go sooner. Shirley eventually answered at 92. Since she was in love with him. Because of her belief in marriage and her inability to imagine living without him. As she told the truth, her voice was filled with grief and power. She didn't make confessions out of resentment. That was freedom. She had been silent for decades, but now she could finally speak out about what had truly transpired. Unrestricted to reveal the lady behind the grin. But a wave of astonishment accompanied her reality. Fans were taken aback. Critics gave Jack's legacy a new assessment. Hollywood veterans even speculated about what else might have been concealed. Shirley's admissions were more than just an epiphany. They opened a whole new perspective on one of Hollywood's most glitzy couples. She told the truth, but the consequences weren't over yet. Because when the silence was broken, the issue was, how would Hollywood react now that the carefully crafted image of Jack Cassidy had been shattered? Hollywood was at a loss for how to respond when Shirley's allegations finally came to light. For many years, Jack Cassidy was regarded as a dynamic Broadway performer. A TV personality and the famous father of teenage sensation David Cassidy. He had a reputation as a charismatic star who could light up any stage. However, Shirley's remarks caused that well-guarded memory to shatter. All of a sudden, the industry had to re-evaluate Jack's true identity behind the scenes. Fans were taken aback. A few devoted fans felt deceived, finding it difficult to connect the polished performance with the wild, self-destructive man Shirley portrayed. Some weren't even shocked. For years, there had been rumors of Jack's crazy ways. The one person who knew him the best, however, now verified them. And it wasn't simply the unending adultery that made folks uneasy. It was the audacity of it. Jack had done more than cheat. He lived without bounds, showing off his double life during a period when doing so may have resulted in the instant termination of a career. The consequences were undoubtedly bittersweet. She had, on the one hand, finally let go of secrets that she had kept for decades. She was, on the other hand, reliving the disintegration of her husband's reputation, piece by piece. The news focused on Jack's extramarital encounters with both men and women. His career was re-examined in Hollywood retrospectives, frequently with Shirley's confessions as the primary focus rather than his skill. Even his terrible fire dying at age 49 took on a more sinister, nearly symbolic significance. Another careless conclusion to a careless life. But Shirley never made him a bad guy. She made it obvious that Jack was her true love in each interview. He often broke her heart, but she still loved him. The contrast captivated people. How was she able to endure such destruction and love a man so much? Hollywood was split on the issue. Her strength was seen impressive by others, who also commended her loyalty. Others attacked her for remaining silent, arguing that she gave up too much of herself to save a marriage that was doomed from the beginning. Even the Cassidy kids were affected. David Cassidy had long talked about his father's narcissism and unpredictable conduct, but Shirley's candor in his later years gave his remarks more weight. Inquiring as to how much of David's battles with addiction and celebrity were caused by the turmoil Jack had caused in the family, fans revisited his challenges. The Partridge family had made the Cassidy name associated with innocent charm, but all of a sudden it was linked to grief and controversy. Shirley's legacy was unaffected by her choice to speak, though. It improved it. She wasn't merely a well-known actress at 92. She turned into an outspoken individual who was not hesitant to expose the glitzy Hollywood facade and highlight the price of dating someone like Jack Cassidy. She gained respect, humanity, and relatability as a result of her admissions. She was at last free after decades of bearing the burden of silence. Hollywood re-examined Shirley's tenacity and Jack's legacy, but one unanswered question persisted. Was there something more sinister that Shirley concealed, too terrible or too explosive to ever come out in full, or had she told us everything? Shirley Jones didn't seem to have told us everything, even after her disclosures. She attested about Jack Cassidy's heedless need for attention, the infidelity, and the affairs with both men and women when she was 92. However, her voice pauses suggested recollections that were too unfiltered to be discussed. She only disclosed what the public could handle, according to friends. According to Hollywood rumors, he exhibited darker behavior, harshness, breakdowns, and reckless encounters, but he stopped short, either out of love or to preserve his reputation as her children's father. The information she did divulge was already eerie. Devoted but embarrassed, Jack was hooked to testing limits and thrived on chaos. Shirley acknowledged that despite the fact that he had broken her, she would always love him. Her narrative was made memorable by that paradox. The issue remains, though, if this is what she admitted, what secrets did Shirley Jones carry with her to the afterlife that no one will ever know?